Hello and welcome to the Ship Shape Podcast, a series of podcasts where we meet amazing people and talk about their experiences, personal, technical, and all related to the maritime world. Come and dive in, dive in, dive in.
This is the Ship Shape Podcast.
Today's special guest, we have Lexi Ossinger with us, one of the key networkers in the industry. I've run into him a ton of times at different boat shows, from Ibex to Newport. He was out in Fort Lauderdale. He is the president, co-owner, and sea lord of BoatRx. And, how about you talk about your company a little bit and where you work and what do you guys do?
Yeah, so BoatRx designs, distributes, and installs battery-powered air conditioning systems. We are based in Boston currently. And so what we're actually doing is we're enabling smaller boats who, never had the ability to have a generator to have air conditioning while they're underway. So think, power boats that have a small cabin, things like that. We're using DC technology for those boats. So we're using DC air conditioners. And then for the larger boats, we're using something called VRV, which instead of a chiller where it's circulating, thick inch tubes that are going throughout the entire boat, we're actually using a centralized compressor with flexible refrigerant lines that's sending tiny amounts of refrigerant to each air handler in the boat on demand. And it's all variable speed, variable capacity. So something like that is anywhere from 40 to 75% more efficient than a chiller, which is changing the game for boats in the 50 to 200 plus foot range, where in some cases they're actually able to get rid of their generator altogether. So we're doing something that is enabling people to think differently about their boats and have a more seamless experience with their boat, where they don't need a generator, they don't need other things that are going to make it more difficult to maintain and actually operate their boat.
Nice.
Also, why BoatRx, like the name?
So BoatRx is kind of following the kind of trendy RX nomenclature that you see in popping up in startups everywhere. Like there's good RX and there's other ones online that are popping up everywhere now. But we wanted to keep the name as generic as possible because I see the opportunities being so wide. The opportunities in this industry are absolutely endless. So I didn't want to pigeonhole ourselves by naming us, air conditioning specialist pro or whatever it is. And the name was actually also in place before I kind of got on board. So my business partner, Phil, he started the company almost 6 years ago as a one-man service provider where he was handling any call that came to him, where it's, heads, electronics, refrigerators, anything he was tackling. And then over the years got more and more specialized. And at some point he realized that there was no one in Boston, at least, doing air conditioning or refrigeration. That's where he kind of found his niche, and then went down to the Virgin Islands to really spend an entire winter just doing air conditioning and refrigeration work down there. And that's where he kind of sharpened his skills. And it wasn't until the Miami Boat Show in 2020 where I got involved. And he also had a customer that wanted a battery-powered air conditioning system, and that was kind of his first time running into something like that. And when I saw that, I was like, my eyes lit up, and I was like, okay, this is our product. This is our vision. We're taking this and we're hitting it as hard as we can. So that was 2 years ago now.
And what growth have you seen in those 2 years since you've kind of got on board? Because we can't stress enough, it's always a team, essentially scales the business. And as you said earlier, there's a lot of businesses that are kind of one-man shows. And, so what does having a team bring to the table in terms of business? Yeah,
there's two philosophies in this industry where it's the, stay small and keep it all, or the more the corporation or the more business route. So we decided from a very early stage that we were not doing the stay small, keep it all method and going the opposite way. And so we're four right now. We have 2 technicians in the field and then me and Phil.
What other boat shows you've been to this year?
Let's see. I was at New England Boat Show. I was at Metz in Amsterdam. I was at the Miami show a couple weeks ago as well.
What, no Boston for you?
Well, New England, yeah. New England Boat Shows there as well.
Oh, you managed to go to Miami and the Boston Boat Show?
Yeah, there's 4 days, 5 days, so I split up 2 and 2.
Jesus, you're a legend, man. Okay, so Lexi, how'd you get into, the boating world? Did you grow up sailing or any of that?
So I have no background in sailing or boating really growing up at all. I moved to Boston after college to work for a tech startup. And being a poor, fresh out of college student, I needed a cheap place to live. And I heard people lived on boats in the harbor for cheap money. So I started exploring it and ended up buying a boat on Craigslist, sight unseen, for that was right in the shipyard in East Boston, and got a slip as well there. And that was my first experience of getting onto boats. And I sailed that first time after I had a buddy from New Hampshire come drive down and take a look at the boat, because I knew he knew boats. He worked at Bass Pro Shops. And he got on the boat and said, wow, you have a great boat. Like, there's brand new sails, there's this, there's that. And so this thing is an awesome boat to learn how to sail on. And I'm like, sure, I knew that, right? No, I have no idea. So we went out sailing that day, and that was the first time I've ever been sailing in my life. It was at 22 years old, something like that. And that was 5 years ago now.
Sheesh.
Trial
So
by fire.
the story of your fall from grace. Nice.
Yeah. And the first time we went out, I ran aground. So I got my,
Yeah.
earned my
That's a
stripes
great way
early.
to start. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so were you living on your boat as well?
Yeah, exactly. So I was a liveaboard for, I
Nice.
think, 4 summers, and only could muster up one winter. I did one winter in the harbor, and I decided to not do that again.
Okay. And then, so once you were living on the boat, is that when like it clicked that I just want to make my living on the water? Like, how did that happen?
Yeah, so that's stemmed from the startup as well. I was, working crazy hours, and I was definitely very burnt out. So I gave a 6-month notice to the startup that I was going to be leaving. And I was looking
And this
for,
was like a bicycle company.
no, so this is actually a software startup for car dealerships. And we were
I see.
right downtown in Boston. So I used to take my dinghy back and forth from East Boston to downtown every day. That was my commute. And
Nice.
yeah,
That's a cool way
so
to
I
get
knew
to work.
I knew I was burnt out and wanted to leave.
Okay. The dinghy didn't change things for you.
No, I mean, definitely had some mornings where it died in the middle of the harbor and I was late to meetings and stuff, but it was
Oh boy.
it was fun, at least, at the very least. The
Okay.
But then what actually led me to the industry is that I was planning my next move, my next business opportunity, my next life plan, and my thought was either to go to Asia for a couple months or go to Europe for a couple months and kind of just get away. But then I heard of a friend that was going to be sailing to the Virgin Islands, and I ended up kind of forcing myself on him a little bit and got on his boat to sail to the Virgin Islands. And I ended up staying in the Virgin Islands for 6 months.
Nice.
And this is Phil, right?
Yes, exactly. My business partner, or my eventual business partner, Phil. He was
Nice.
working
And so-
down there, working for an air conditioning company that worked on all the yachts down there. It was a service company. And so he brought me a little bit closer to the industry. I wasn't working at the time. I was just, being a beach bum and drinking every day and things like that. I definitely knew that it was not for me, just the kind of the island beach life, but I saw the industry and how far behind it was. So I was making software for car dealerships, which car dealerships are 10 years behind, the tech world. Here, the boat world is 10 years behind the car world. So I just found an industry that was ripe for innovation and ripe for change. And so that's what really got me started and got me excited about the industry. It's just the amount of opportunity there is.
So do you still enjoy what you do though?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Has it completely changed? I mean, compared to like the last job, do you still live on a boat?
So I do not at the moment, but
Okay.
come May 1st, I will be living on a boat again. I actually
Nice.
just closed on a new boat yesterday.
Nice. Okay. That's good timing. So the world now knows as well.
Yeah.
And then, but do you enjoy like the marine environment and specifically your niche, which is, refrigeration and cooling and all that stuff? Would you
Absolutely.
recommend it to other people?
Absolutely. I think it's definitely a niche, like you said, especially in New England. Air conditioning is not something that is needed year-round, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes for some serious seasonality with the business. And, that makes it challenging to operate year-round.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of just getting into, we also do the electrical systems. So like the lithium batteries and things like that to support our air conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
That is definitely something that anyone can get into and be successful year-round in New England by having these electrical skills.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but you're saying AC systems that run 100% on batteries and solar, is that what we're talking about?
Correct. So yeah, we specialize in battery-powered air conditioning systems. So we'll take power from anywhere, and wherever you want to create power, we'll take it. So we'll take it from solar, wind. We'll install high output alternators. If you have a generator, you can still use your generator, or if you want, we can take it out in a lot of cases. But it's all dependent on the application, depending on the boat. So all these systems are, it's an equation of how much power you use and how much power you put back in. So it's all an equation.
So give me like a typical day in the life of Lexi. Are you more like coordinating the gigs, or are you doing the installations, or like how big is your team?
I'm very much on the business side of things. I'm doing everything that's not on the boats primarily. So we have a team that actually is the ones that are physically on the boats and doing the installations, but I'm more handling sales, marketing, the books, everything kind of like back office.
So you have a good handle on like what, a big gig would be like how big a boat have you guys done?
So the biggest we've physically performed an install on is an 82-foot oyster.
Is that a sailboat?
That's a sailboat, yeah. We were just helping the manufacturer with that one. We actually weren't the ones that were taking lead on that. The biggest we're taking lead on is a 62-foot Little Harbor monohull sailboat. That's what we're currently working on up in Harpswell, Maine.
And so they're also getting the whole outfit with the solar and this and that and everything.
The boat that we're working on right now is a Little Harbor 62 in Harpswell, Maine. We're working with the shipyard. The shipyard's going to be the ones doing actually the whole electrical system. So they're doing 2 high output alternators, and each of these alternators, it's called integral. It produces about 8.5 to 9 kilowatts of power. So he's getting 2 of those. So he's getting rid of his generator completely on a 62-foot boat. And we're the ones that are doing the air conditioning system.
I see.
He's going generator free on a 62-foot sailboat, which years ago was considered to not be possible.
Yep. Recently, a few years ago, wasn't possible.
Exactly, yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
One of the stories that I've heard a ton of times, it's also the case with me and T, but people that are coming from different diverse backgrounds and then getting into the marine industry has been like a trend. So, what was it about the boating lifestyle that you got into? Was it being on the water? Was it the community? Like, what was that driving force that kept you here?
Yeah, I think it's the community for sure. Boats have a way of just bringing people together. We're living in a time where everything is so disconnected. Like, we're hyper connected, which leaves us all disconnected. So on a boat, when you're out in sea, like, it's the one time where you actually get true connection from people, it seems like. So you can bring a group of friends of 4 or 5 and you have the most memorable trip of your life in that, when you're forced together in a small sailboat or something like that. So that definitely is a huge driver for me, is the ability to bring people together and kind of the social aspect of boating.
Well, that was extraordinarily well said. Are you afraid of sharks?
Am I afraid of sharks? I definitely have a very good respect for sharks, and I know they're everywhere. I remember one time we were sailing Phil's boat. We were sailing from North Carolina back to Boston, and we were in the Gulf Stream, and I was fishing, and I started pulling, a fish in, and then a swarm of like 3 dozen sharks started chasing after the fish and just ate it whole. And I'd just never seen so many sharks in my life, and I was scared to death. So yes, I guess in that sense, I am afraid of sharks.
Well, no swimming today. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, so coming back to your day job, then what like gets you up in the morning? Yeah, like why do you keep doing it? Why that niche? Is that your dream gig?
I think the opportunity is what really gets me up in the morning. I feel like I just see so many trends that are working in our favor that there's no ability for us to fail. And I see it's no secret that our industry is aging rapidly and everyone's kind of getting out all at the same time. And there's very few people who actually take a business mindset to the marine industry. Very much a cottage industry where people are retiring into the job. I worked in this high stakes, high stress job, and then I became a yacht broker when I was 58, something like that. So there's a lot of these cottage type industry or cottage mindsets that are brought into the industry, and there's very few young business people that are in here. I just see it's ripe for opportunity to consolidate, to bring better practices, bring better service to customers. So no matter which tack we actually take or go on, that's what definitely drives me and gets me excited about the industry. Plus, technology-wise, it's just very far behind, so it's easy as well.
It's pretty wild when you kind of really sit and take a look at it. It's like so many other industries have been evolving over time, and boating has just been completely forgotten. And so there are so many opportunities. And I try to preach that all the time, to people. I'm like, oh, get into the boat industry, man. It's where it's at. You can essentially just climb up the ladder extraordinarily fast because there is so much opportunity and people are aging out. It's a very old industry. But ultimately it comes down to creating awareness. That's the biggest problem that kind of everyone faces. No one knows about the boating industry. And when you speak to people about it and you say, oh yeah, yachting industry, boating industry, they're like, whoa, look at you cross-eyed. Like, my God, that's the craziest thing I ever heard. For us, it's not that crazy, but for everyone else, it's something.
Yeah, no, it's very true. Very true. But I look at all that stuff as positives and just more opportunity for us. I like thinking about technology and the way technology is adopted. Like for instance, 4G. Like a lot of Africa and South America had 4G before the United States did, because when you have a clean slate and you don't have these pre-existing technologies that are things are sitting on top of, you can come in and bring the latest technology to a space. And that's how I feel about the boating world, where they haven't had this technology or innovation over the last 10, 20 years. And now it's just a clean slate for us to come in and bring totally new ideas and new concepts to the market.
It also brings up a pretty good point, right? So, what I've been seeing is that there's been a rapid growth in technology in the marine industry, smart engines, electric engines, interconnected systems. And, with all this advancement in technology, the support that is behind it, right? The service providers, that is like a major, point of contention, because, a lot of people are coming from a very mechanical background, and very rapidly is there these interconnected electrical smart systems coming in. How do you see the industry going in terms of that, with technology and it being a dated industry?
Well, it's going to have to happen no matter what. I say that because this industry follows the consumer. If we're talking about, leisure marine and yachting, the whole industry is propped up around just giving the customer what they want. And the customers are wanting technologically enabled boats and systems in their life. Lithium batteries is a great example where people in the industry aren't pushing it because it's more risk. It's something new. They're already busy enough where they don't want to try something new. And it's the customers who already have their Tesla. They already have their Powerwall. They already have these different things that they're the ones that are saying, hey, my Tesla's got a lithium battery. Why isn't my boat? Or why do I have to run a generator to, get air conditioning when my Tesla doesn't? It's like, I don't get it. So it's the customer who's going to dictate whether this actually happens in the industry or not.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you're coming from a unique perspective, especially from, a different business side of things. And, I've heard throughout all the boat shows, you got two groups of people. You got people that have had so many jobs over the past few years that they're like, I'm good. I don't need any other help. Right. And then you got the young upstarts that are in the industry that are like, we want to scale, we want to grow. And so it's an interesting dynamic of, people that have been like, word of mouth, and they're like, okay, well, I'm going to be in this industry for another few years and then I'm going to retire. And then you got these younger people, which are very few of us. And, they're like, okay, how do we grow? How do we expand? And how do we scale?
Absolutely right. And the only way to do that is really to latch onto new technologies and bring new things to market, because the ability you have as a younger person is to be more flexible, be more adaptive to change and things like that. So if you can bring those things to the market, that's where your competitive advantage comes from.
So, Lexi, you mentioned trends a couple of times. Let's dig a little deeper into that. What trends are you seeing happening, and how can somebody getting into the industry right now sort of take advantage of those trends?
Well, one is be young. It's a great way to take advantage of a trend going on, which is people who are, especially on the service side of things, wanting to get out. So I'm definitely a very ambitious person. So if you're not as ambitious, which is totally fine, there's massive opportunity to make real money right now. Because there's all these service providers who are trying to sell their businesses that don't have anyone to sell to. I get approached at least every other week, if not maximum once a month, with just random service businesses that want to sell to us. And for me, in a lot of cases, there's nothing for me to buy. But if you have a technical mindset and you want to actually be on boats fixing boats, there's massive opportunity just to come in and start to make money right away. So I definitely encourage anyone who is younger to just try to find someone older who doesn't necessarily have an apprentice or anything like that. And in a few years, I would imagine you'd be owning the business.
And do you need, obviously you can answer for your niche, but what sort of licenses or training or capital would somebody entering need to have?
Yeah, so for licensing and training and stuff, it definitely is kind of the Wild West out there in terms of service providing and stuff. You don't need anything really, but it's really recommended to have your ABYC certifications. The American Boating and Yachting Council, I believe, is the acronym. But we require all of our techs to have at least the electrical certification from the ABYC. They do have smaller certs that are less stringent. The electrical one's actually pretty in depth, which I actually really appreciate. And if you want to get into air conditioning, there is EPA certifications that you need just to be able to handle refrigerant gases and stuff like that our business requires. But
how about stuff like insurance? I bet on these multi-million-dollar boats, getting insurance isn't a piece of cake either.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you definitely need an insurance policy, and typically the minimum policy even covers up to $3 million for boats. But yeah, you absolutely need insurance. You'll be bankrupt if you do not have it, because things will go wrong and claims will be made. So it is vitally important to have that.
Okay. And so one of the other trends you mentioned was sort of, the consumer just asking for green and environmentally friendly and batteries and less gas. And we're seeing that so much in the geopolitical scene as well. But
Absolutely.
What other sort of, green environmental trends are you seeing over the next 5-10 years?
Sure. So to kind of like touch on the more geopolitical side of it first, is that unfortunately, America is not the most efficient country out there in the world. Definitely Europe is way ahead of where we are in terms of efficiency and emissions and things like that. But now it actually makes sense. As soon as gas prices get to a certain level, it makes financial sense to have more efficient systems. And that's where we're actually at right now with the crisis in Ukraine, where the gas prices are going through the roof. And now these systems become more affordable because over the lifetime of whatever system is, say a generator or a battery system or something like that, is now more affordable to go the alternative, more emissions-free route than it is to install a generator and actually run it constantly. From a kind of long-term perspective, 5-10 year perspective, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on, and like I said, in Europe. People will keep looking at hydrogen for power generation, which is really exciting. Definitely, we have our eyes closely peeled to hybrid propulsion. We think electric propulsion is coming, but there's a handful of roadblocks that need to be overcome, and we have our eyes pretty we're in bed with a lot of those guys as well, and talking to them to make sure we're on the cutting edge. Because any boat that is that has a battery that is running their engines, it also needs the most efficient systems in the boat as well, because otherwise you're taking away from your runtime, you're taking away from your range. So that's why our air conditioning systems are anywhere from 40 to 70% more efficient than what's currently on the boat. So if you want air conditioning and you have an electric boat, you need to have the most efficient air conditioner possible.
So in one way, is that becoming the future of sailing? Is it going to become solar sailing?
Well, I think in a lot of ways, sailing's always been this emissions-free way to go about the world. And I think that's the philosophy that's always been around. They were the first ones to adopt solar power.
What I mean is that the new boats that are coming out are joystick friendly, and sailboats as such are a really small percentage of just in the US, the boats anyway, 6% or something. Mel, correct me if I'm wrong, And so people want that sort of, easy start and go access, and so will it just, as they swap out the diesels and the gas for electric, and they have, like you were saying, like big solar panels powering the whole thing, they almost don't need sales anymore.
Yeah. I mean, yes and no. I mean, sailboats will always need sales. Sales are one of the greatest ways of propulsion right now. So I don't think that'll ever go away. It's definitely not in vogue right now in America at all. Boating is very different in America than it is the rest of the world. It's very much a status symbol and things like that.
It'll be interesting to kind of see the trend over time. Looking at statistical data, sailing has just year after year decreased. And most of the sailboats that are actually being sold in the United States are being imported from other countries. Obviously, power boats is the big one, right? There's a new demographic of people coming into the industry. That's early 40s families that have kids. They're environmentally conscious. And, sailing has been seen as a hard thing to do that requires a whole lot of training. And, what we're seeing is that boats between 20 to 30 feet with outboards are kind of the overall biggest percentage of boats being bought. But,
do you have any data around the ages? Because my general instinct would be that the average age of sailors actually getting younger. Is that true with all boating, or just power boating, or just?
Well, in terms of the statistics of the industry, it's also kind of like a black hole. There's not a lot of information out there.
Absolutely.
The NMMA, they put out kind of the industry analysis, but they don't go into depth like that. And most of the surveys that are actually being put out there that people are saying are reflective of the industry are like a 300-person survey. So you can't really determine any of that. We have registration data of 4 million boat owners, and they say the age of the boat, but they don't say like who, how old these people are that are getting into the industry. It's kind of, we're hearing that it's early 40s families that have kids, and that's what's being propagated in the industry. So, in our perspective, we're like, okay, we got to run with that.
Yeah. I could see, like, from my perspective, I could see the average age of sailor getting much younger because of all the different YouTube channels out there that are just
dominating more publicity. Yeah.
Like, I have friends that are, not even generally related to boating that are asking me, but, oh, I saw this video, the Sailing Like Vagabond, they were so cool, and they were sailing like across the ocean. That's crazy. Is that what you do? And I'm like, well, no, but yeah.
Sorta.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Loosely. I'm definitely not as attractive as them, but that's, a different story.
Too funny. But so you have traveled a lot then, specifically for, to promote your marine business. And as you were mentioning, internationally, the trends aren't necessarily the same as you're seeing here. So what do you see in other places in the world for the marine industry?
So there is just a stark divide between the U.S. boating market and the European boating market, where they just don't understand each other and they have no desire to like work together. Really, it's pretty insane to see. Because I was
give us an example. What do you mean?
Yeah, so people in the industry in Europe doesn't understand the U.S. market at all and how the U.S. consumer thinks or buys or invests money into things. They are solely focused on product and features, and they assume their features are the best because it's what they built. They don't take very much feedback from consumers and input from people who are actually buying the products. They just build something because it's the best and it's awesome and it's cool, but they don't really think as much about the way it gets to market or the way people interact with it and things like that. Whereas the US, it's all dollars and cents based. So everything is marketing, everything is how do we get more customers in the door? And the product definitely severely suffers in the United States, where the quality in the United States of the boating industry is very low because it's very vanity based. And that's why the boating industry it's in America is very bubbly or frothy. Frothy is a great way to put it. In America, it's very frothy. There's a veneer that keeps prices very high and very inflated.
Okay, and would that be the reason that, or at least one of the reasons that the U.S. boating industry seems like it just dominates all the others in terms of like dollar terms?
Absolutely. Definitely. It's because things are just sold for a lot more here.
And so number of boats though, would they be comparable? Like where would is the US number one in number of boats? Do people love it that much? What's number two?
I couldn't tell you from an actual numbers perspective. Wouldn't be surprised if it was the US. I think our boats are a lot smaller, so you have a lot of these like center consoles that are dominating the market, and there's hundreds of thousands of them. So I think that would be, and we have lake boats and all these different other parts of the market that are not on the ocean.
Yeah, it's interesting to see the trends in the industry. Obviously, the United States market is the biggest by far, but if you look at the imports and exports over time, a lot of countries are starting to pick up on the recreational boating market, and as time goes on, there's just going to be more and more boats going to other countries, and that market will increase. And another thing that we've noticed too, and no one has actually really done a analysis of what happens 5 years from now, right? In terms of boat ownership. And sadly, all the people that are coming up with these statistics are like SEO dudes that are using the wrong numbers. And so there's really not a good gauge of what's going to happen. And what we're thinking is going to happen is that just because there's so much of these new app companies and platforms coming into the industry, because it is a technology dated industry, that just there's going to be more marketing that has ever happened before. And so it's going to get a wider range of people into boating. And so, we think that there's just going to be more boats, which gets to another point. If you look at it statistically, the number of boats to service providers is crazy, right? If you were to exaggerate how many service providers there are by like 10x, it still comes out to one service business working on 170 boats. And so it's even more than that, but with those exaggerated terms, 1 to 170, that's outrageous. And so, yeah, really no business should be just getting by or surviving. Everyone should be doing a lot better than what they are. And it's unique to hear your perspective because you have clients that range like over a large expanse. And, the marine industry, for the most part, being word of mouth, a lot of these service providers are kind of stuck at the marinas that they've built that community with. And they don't really go to other marinas or really travel long distances. So how did you go about, establishing your business, and how did you basically expand your range in terms of like marketing and all that?
Yeah, so I think it's just a fundamentally different approach to how a business is and how a business should be. A lot of these service businesses were made before the wide use of the internet. So the way that they got customers is by physically being near the boats. So they find a big marina, find a big area, and they just go as close as possible to them. And they put up a sign, or they might run an ad in local, yellow pages or something like that. Whereas there are very few businesses that have been started in the last 15 years when people have smartphones and things like that. Because customers nowadays, they don't find business in the same way that they did 20 years ago. You're not looking to the yellow pages anymore. You're not looking in the newspaper or something like that. You're actually online just Googling. And that's the only way you're going to be able to find things. So that's the way, at least how I operate, is I'm just Googling everything. That's how I interact with all businesses I interact with, like pizza shops and things like that. But to bring it back to your actual question, how did we find that market? It's definitely social media. By being on Instagram and producing at least halfway decent content. Like, our content is not great and it's very scarce. We don't put a lot out, but what we do put out is a lot better than what other people are putting out there. I'm tired of people in the service industry or in the marine space in general just putting nondescript pictures of just products on their Instagram and think it's like a good Instagram post or something like that, or just like there's no character to a lot of what they're putting out there. So at least what we're trying to do is show that you can be young and interested and smart and be on these boats, earning these jobs that are desirable. You're not just in the villages getting dirty every day. Definitely, that's part of it. But there is opportunity to be someone who is considered to be of value.
Well, I am most definitely going to quote you on, the fact that most of these businesses were started before the wide use of the internet. That's unbelievable. I've never heard anyone say it like that. And, everything makes sense now.
Yeah, that's why our phones ring nonstop, and it's people just interact with businesses differently when they're in different age demographics. We get calls every day saying, "Hey, do you guys do this?" Like something totally random that we don't do, like let's say outboard work. Like there's nothing on our marketing, nothing on our website, nothing anywhere says that we do maintenance on outboards. But people just call and ask, and like, "Oh, do you know anyone else?" And it's all that word of mouth kind of network effect that I have to refer to someone else, and so it's a fundamentally different way to interact with businesses and other humans, to be honest.
So Lexi, so it sounds like there's definitely more involved than just like good service. So like what would like the top 5 be, to be successful in like 2022?
Top 5 ways to be successful in 2022.
In the marine industry. It can be a top 3.
I think going after younger customers is the way to sustain a long-lasting business, because the not only is the service side of the industry aging, the actual consumer is aging. The ones that are spending a lot of money, like these baby boomers and things like that, they're aging out, and their lifetime value from that customer is very low compared to someone who is doing well on a job, or they're a lawyer or something like that, and they're in their 30s. That customer is going to be worth a lot more to you than the person who is 75 and on their last boat. So interacting and engaging with younger customers and targeting those people would definitely be a huge way to be successful. Another way is definitely just customer service, by just setting expectations and meeting them or exceeding them. It's so often in this industry where you make a call and they're like, "Oh yeah, I'll be there on Tuesday." And then Tuesday comes, no call, no show. You try calling him, texting him, nothing. You get something back 3 days later saying, "Oh, sorry, hey, I was on a job, I was doing this, and I couldn't get back to you, sorry." So just meeting expectations or exceeding them is definitely a second way to be successful in 2022.
I was going to say with your business, it's a unique situation, right? Because the whole marine industry, it's super complicated. It's as complicated as homes, right? There's so many different services out there.
More complicated for sure.
And, some, like if you're talking about engines, right? Like every year someone's getting some type of engine work going on. But with your type of business, you're going to have to correct me if I'm wrong, but it's essentially like you do a major install and you might not hear from the customer for, who knows how long. So It's a constant trying to find more leads and businesses. It's unique. We're going to scrap that whole thing. Yeah.
No, I like it, but like push that more. So how do the leads come then, is what I would say.
I have a point off of what Meryl was saying.
Mm-hmm.
But the third thing I would say to be successful in 2022 is to say no. To say no a lot. Because there's a lot of boats, like Meryl pointed out, there's 170 boats for each service provider or something like that. There's a lot of boats out there, but not all of them are good jobs or good for your portfolio. So saying no as much as possible actually will make you more successful, which is a crazy thing to think about.
Good point.
Now, even though you guys kind of range in the distance that you're willing to travel to do the work, I got to ask, what's up with going internationally? What are you going out there scoping out products to bring back to the United States, or, what is your company's goal? What are you guys trying to get to?
So the reason why we're at things like Mets and are, at some of these shows internationally is, one, network. That's where the actual players are, where a lot of these companies are based in Europe and have started there at least. So in Europe, that's where the players actually are. So the people in the industry who actually have the say and dictate what products get made and what doesn't get made and what kind of proliferates the industry. So I'm there to talk to movers and shakers to actually try to get things that we want made and partner with companies that are doing cool things and making cool products. because
Hmm.
those companies are very scarce in the United States. So the innovation happens in Europe, and where the huge business opportunity to bring those products to the United States and actually translate them into a marketing package and a message that actually translates and communicates well with the US customer.
That's cool. So what was the last boat show you went to recently, internationally?
Internationally was Metz, was the most recent
Okay.
one.
And what was the coolest thing you saw there?
There's a company called Whisper Power, which is actually a pretty large company in Europe, that they specialize in hybrid electrical systems. So using a battery as your backbone for the entire boat, which is already kind of how boats work, but allowing you to have way less generator runtime. And they also make generators that are super efficient. So just efficiency is at the core of what they do. And so that's someone we met there that was, really kind of impressed us with what they're doing, that they just, quite frankly, haven't really gotten into the United States market. And it's been great to chat with them and learn more about what they do.
Nice.
One of the things that I found interesting about the marine industry is, it's so vast, but really it's actually a pretty small place. And going to all these different boat shows, you start to see the people that go to all the other boat shows. And, everyone knows each other and everyone has drinks after, which makes it just such a tight-knit community. And I think that makes the boating industry unique in that sense. If you were to get into the home industry, I mean, there's so many people in that industry and, automotive as well. But being in the boating community, in the industry, everyone knows each other. Everyone's pretty friendly. So that's, pretty awesome.
You're absolutely right with the community being so tight-knit and things like that. I came from the tech world, which is very cutthroat, and everyone is just trying to, everyone's a startup. Everyone's trying to use their elbows to get as much room as possible. Not friendly at all. Especially the car dealership world is not friendly. It's very competitive. Whereas I've been met with open arms at so many of these places. It's been fantastic. A lot of the older people in the industry recognize that there's no one else behind them, and they want to support anyone else that is young and wants to make a mark in this industry. So that has been hugely helpful, and it's been great to actually get to know some of these people. And like you said, as soon as you make a couple shows, you start to see the same people and become friends just because you're all at the same shows doing the same thing. Like I became friends with someone who sells life rafts. There's nothing, I have no direct business need to be friends with him or anything like that, but we're just at all the same shows together. We rode the same shuttle from the parking lot twice, and since then I see him at every show.
Small world.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So sort of then go on, man.
Yeah. So when it comes to the youth in the industry, right, and the lack thereof, what is your take on that issue of there's not any kids coming into the marine industry? Do you have any idea of what needs to happen in your perspective, or how to really drive these kids into the industry? That's
a really challenging problem.
Yeah.
It's bigger than just us. It's bigger than the marine industry. It's more of a trend that's across the whole country. So it's not just something that we can solve alone. But I think making workplaces more technology friendly is one small step that can be made. Whereas I've seen it all the time. So we subcontract sometimes for a company down in the Virgin Islands, and there's a couple of young guys there, and then there's a couple of old guys. And whenever the young guys are with the old guys just yell at the kids, saying, "Get off your phone! Get off your phone! What are you doing? Get off your phone!" It's just constant. So even though they might be working, they might be researching something, might be pulling up a manual or something like that. So I guess the first small step that can be made is making workplaces more tech friendly and understand that phones are a part of kids these days. They are one. There's no way around it, unfortunately.
Yeah, I've heard countless times about the idea of someone needs to earn their salt, and that's come to bite a lot of people in the butt, right, in terms of retention. And a lot of businesses are hiring, but as you said earlier, not a lot of people are in the industry that have a very good business mindset and, aren't thinking about retention and, all these other facets that actually make a successful business.
Absolutely. Can't deny that.
So what is the best job that you've ever worked on?
One of my favorite jobs is we did a full electrical and air conditioning refit on a Hatteras 52. And I liked it because it was kind of just an unorthodox boat. The customer was spending more money than the boat was worth on a refit. And it was just because he was purely passionate about the boat and loved high-tech systems and integration. And he didn't want to have to run a generator to have air conditioning. And so it's kind of a passion project for him. And so we were able to come in and install a huge lithium-ion battery bank and install all the different chargers involved and integrate that with the existing generator. The customer also installed a whole, array of solar panels on the Bimini. So I think it was 1,300 watts, something like that, 1,600 watts of solar on the Bimini. And for me, it was just opened my eyes about what a motorboat can be. We think of motorboats as being just like extremely inefficient and, just constantly consuming. But if you think about it a little bit differently, which is largely what we're trying to do, is trying to make people think differently about their boats, then you can actually have an experience where you're largely off the grid, because he can motor out to the islands for a weekend, drop the anchor, and he can be there for the weekend. And pretty much, if he wants to, can live just off the solar for the entire weekend without having to run a generator. So that's really special to get into jobs like that, where the customer, right now, like the monetary benefit, like he definitely paid a premium for what he got, which is awesome to get customers that were willing to do that just in terms of wanting to have his comfort the way he wanted it and didn't want to have to run the generator constantly. So it was a special job for us.
And since you guys have such an insight into like battery technology and stuff, is there anything new and exciting we should be looking out for?
Not for the next few years, at least. I mean, luckily, there's massive money getting poured into battery technology, but it takes a few years for it to trickle down to the marine industry. So people in the car space are investing in all this research into different chemistries and different formats of batteries and things like that. So for the next few years, the name of the game is lithium batteries. It's getting those on more boats, as many boats as possible. I think there'll be more interesting technologies happening in the generation space before battery technology sees a new wave of another type of battery, in my opinion.
Now, on to the worst job you've ever had. And I bet it has something to do with tip number 3 of learning to say no.
Yeah. I wonder how widely this podcast is going to reach, so I don't want to reach back to him. But,
don't take any names or anything.
Oh, no, I'm not going to do anything like that, but we've only done one of these jobs. And basically, it was a heater that had some issues that we were troubleshooting, and it just kept getting deeper and deeper. And from the start, we told him to replace the heater, but then it just kept snowballing, and he wanted to change this part and that part, and kept troubleshooting till he, ran up the bill 2-3 times of what the heater was actually worth. And it was a whole frustration around getting paid, and he thought it was warranty, and it's just a nightmare. So that's as vague as I can keep it.
Warranties are never fun, especially when they run out, right? But so then what is something that we've talked about, a lot of tips that like the youth can pick up on? What are some of the things, the youth can look out for and not do?
Definitely some red flags that I would not tolerate, because there's definitely this clash of old school versus new school. And like, in my opinion, the old school has kind of that earn your salt, somewhat hazing type culture, very negative at times, and doesn't have the best habits. So not letting yourself fall into those habits and just accept it as normal, when it's like, in some cases, actual abuse, where it's stunting your growth, it's stunting your ability to learn. So getting into an environment where you are encouraged to learn and encouraged to work hard is where you want to be.
So finding good mentors, I like that.
Yeah, when you're having a conversation with someone and someone calls you to do some service, what are some of the red flags that you've experienced?
So we actually don't do service at all anymore. We are just an installer at this point. So we are just installing new systems from scratch, and then we're servicing whatever we install. So that's been a huge change for us, is saying no to that service work. It's hard for me to comment on that.
Yeah. Is there anything that you'd like to bring up about the marine industry that really kind of drove me to it? Is the idea that you can kind of come into this space and kind of make your own way and create your own destiny. And the marine industry is just ripe for entrepreneurs coming into the industry. So can you talk on what it was like to really get the groundwork going with your business on the entrepreneur front and all that? Where did you have the strength to go and basically establish, BoatRx and make it a big presence?
Well, it was challenging, and it still is challenging every day. We're trying to shake up relationships that have been in place for 20, 30 years. So stepping into those spaces of who they buy products from, how they install systems and things like that, those were all challenging conversations to have, and we're still having them every day. So for us, it was important to not try to beat your head against the wall by trying to convince someone who's not going to change, and latching on to people who see a different future. And they might be the smaller shipyards or might represent a smaller amount of business right now, but those are the people that you want to latch on to actually make a business that's going to grow. And that's the name of the game when you're an entrepreneur, when you're starting out, is getting something, talking to people who will grow and who want to actually see your vision and help you make that vision come true.
Did you have any competition when you came into this space, or, any rivals or anything like that?
Luckily, there's next to no competition for what we do specifically in New England, at least, because there's very few air conditioning companies. Because this goes back to what I was saying about with seasonality in New England, where you don't need air conditioning you only need it for a month or two in the summer. So it's not that widespread of a use. Whereas in Florida, there's air conditioning companies everywhere because you need it year round, and you need it on all boats, not just the more luxury ones. So there's little competition to what we do, and there's only maybe 2 or 3 somewhat comparable outfits to what we do in the United States, and they're all in Florida. So we have kind of free reign on the rest of the country in a lot of ways.
So Lexi, where can people find you? Where can people get a hold of BoatRx?
So you can go to our website at BoatRx.com. You can email us at info@boatrx.com. You can also go to our Instagram page, which is @BoatRx, or you can go to our YouTube channel as well.
YouTube channel?
Yep. Not a whole lot of content there, but we're working on it. But anything we do put on there, people see see all of our videos. Like, oh, I've watched every single video you've made. And we haven't made a video in a year, I think.
Nice. Well, best of luck, Lexi. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And
Thanks.
Do great things in the marine industry. Inspire more people as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Take care. Thank you. Stay tuned for more on the Ship Shape podcast.
Check back every Tuesday for our latest episode, and be sure to like, share and subscribe to shipshape.pro.